In today's video, we continue on with our NHL season preview series. We're still going through the teams in the Atlantic Division. Today, we explore the Tampa Bay Lightning. Will they be able to be in cup contention, or is their window closing? We'll discuss that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we're continuing on with our season preview series. Today we look at the Tampa Bay Lightning. Now in recent years, the Lightning have been a very dominant team, winning multiple Stanley Cups, being in the playoffs a long time. Is it time for them to take a step back? Can they continue to be a dominant team? We'll review things today and see how the team has changed since last year to see if that is a possibility or not. So if you're new to this series, we're going to first recap what happened last year. Take a look at some key team and individual stats. Take a look at the salary cap, how the team has changed, what they might do for prospects jumping into the lineup, players who need to bounce back, break through, what's the lineup looking like, and then we'll discuss some expectations and some top questions facing the team going into the season. So let's first recap last year for the Lightning. They were the third place team in the Atlantic, making the playoffs, going to battle the Toronto Maple Leafs, who were the second place team. They finished with a record of 46-30-6 for 98 points, ultimately losing that first round series to Toronto. Toronto's first series win in quite some time. The Lightning, though, have been a dominant playoff team over the last decade. They've been in the playoffs 6 consecutive years, winning 2 Stanley Cups back-to-back in that time frame. They were also in the finals 2 other times. So 4 finals appearances in a decade, making the playoffs 9 out of 10 years. That's really a very dominant decade of destruction for Tampa. Like they've been very, very solid. You can't get a whole lot better than that. But looking at last year's team stats, they scored 283 goals, which was 8th best in the league, so still a pretty strong offense. They gave up 254 for 14th best. That's a little bit, it's still good, but it's a little substandard when you have a guy like Vasilevsky in the net. Goes to show you their decor is weakened a bit over the last few years. The power play was still dominant, though, 25.4% for third best. The PK was average at 79.7% for 15th best. They were led by their top individual performances like Nikita Kucherov with 113 points. Braden Point almost had a 100-point season, getting 95. Stamkos had 84 for the third highest. And then Brandon Hagel, Alex Killorn, and Mikhail Sergachev all had the 4th highest totals, making up 4, 5, and 6 spots here on the team for 64 points. So clearly the team has changed. They had a good year last year. It wasn't quite as dominant. You could see, the regular season results kind of just dipping back a little bit. Defensively, they're a little bit weaker compared to when they won the Stanley Cup a year before that. The third line was totally remade, redone. Still good, but not as dominant as when they had Coleman and Gord, etc. in there, and Barclay Goodrow. Their bottom 6 has continuously been reinvented here quite a bit. And it, like I said, it's still good. It's just not as dominant as when they won those cups. And that's and their decor has been weakened a little bit as well. So to me, that's certainly playing a role. And then, of course, Vasilevsky in the playoffs last year wasn't quite up to Vasilevsky standards, which also made a big impact as to how the Lightning lost and the Leafs finally beat them. And it's just that simple. Now, from a cap perspective right now, they're actually over the cap. I'll show you their snapshot here, courtesy of CapFriendly.com. They're into LTIR. They have an LTIR pool of $6.875 million because of the Brett Seabrook contract that they traded for a couple of seasons back. And they're actually over their LTIR allotment by just over $73,000. That is with a 23-man roster, though. So clearly, it's simple to become cap compliant. Demote one player, go down to 22 players. They can either demote somebody who is waivers exempt if they have one. If not, somebody will have to go through waivers, be reassigned to their AHL team, and boom, just like that, they're compliant. So even though they're technically over, it's not by much, and it's not that difficult of an issue to solve. So let's take a look at how this team has changed over the course of the offseason, starting with the subtractions, and we'll take a look at who's new to the team on the addition side of things. Subtractions for this team was actually quite substantial. They lost Alex Killorn, who they could not afford to re-sign in free agency. Also lost Ross Colton, 2 important members of their middle 6. Guys who could play anywhere really from in your top 3 lines, the versatile guys. They also lost Pat Maroon, Corey Perry, and Pierre-Edouard Bellemare. So that's basically your entire fourth line gone. Your middle six guys that can contribute offensively gone. On the blue line, they also lost Ian Cole and Cal Foote. And backup goaltender Brian Elliott has not returned to the team either. So in this case right now, that's some pretty substantial losses. Now, they might not have lost a superstar player, but some of that important supporting cast is no longer there, and they've had to kind of rejig some things, and we'll take a look at now who's new to the team, who's coming in to replace some of these players. Well, for starters, they signed Connor Shea as a UFA. He gets a fairly valuable contract. He can play in your second, third line roles. Never been a huge goal scorer. I think he's only cracked 20 plus goals once, but he can play with good players. He's proven that before, and he can rack up some assists, and he can be a decent two-way player. So we'll see how exactly where he fits. They also added Tyler Mott most recently. Of course, they did have Josh Archibald signed as well. He was going to be an addition, but then just recently out of the blue notified the team that he wasn't going to be reporting to camp and that he was not going to be playing hockey this year. So they took that extra money that became available and they signed Tyler Mott, who can be a good bottom six player as well. They also signed Logan Brown, who was not retained by the Blues. They brought in veteran defenseman Calvin DeHaan and goaltender Jonas Johansson, who is the Avalanche organization. They have Austin Watson in camp as well on a PTO. So if Watson gets signed, that'll certainly create, which I think he's got a good chance there to play in the fourth line. They're going to want to add a little bit of grit and a little bit of toughness back there, and he can provide that. Doesn't win many fights, but he's certainly not afraid to drop the gloves, and he could be a decent energy guy from time to time. Obviously, good leader off the ice. He's gone through a lot personally, and he's overcome a lot, and he knows what it takes for perseverance. So I do like him as a character player. May not be somebody you put in the lineup every single night, though. We'll see how things go for him as he tries to crack a roster spot with the Lightning there. Obviously, do they have any prospects that you expect to jump up and make this roster and have an impact? Not really. I mean, you can kind of classify Darren Ranish in that category. He didn't play a ton last year, but showed that he could play, and it will likely be a regular this year. He's 27, a little bit older, but because this team has been in win now mode for an extended period of time, they just, a lot of their other youth that they've drafted that has worked out to be decent has already made the team, or they've been moved on from, or they've been traded. So, they don't have much in the cupboard there, so to speak. But Radish is a player who kind of proved last year he could play. A bounce back candidate, I went with Victor Hedman. Victor Hedman's numbers last year weren't awesome. He went from 85 points 2 years ago to 49 last year. So I thought maybe he'll bounce back this year and put up some more points. That could be a big role for him. Obviously, though, as things kind of slowly get, as him and Stamkos start to age, things are transitioning to the other guys in a little bit more higher capacity. Like Mikhail Sergachev has really been elevated. He's slowly taking power play time away from Hedman too, so that obviously will have an impact on his totals. But certainly 2 years back, Hedman was a lot more dominant. Maybe he can give more of a sample out this year. As far as a breakthrough player, I went with Michael Eyssimont. He was a player who was picked up last year by Tampa and really showed he could play, and even in the playoffs. So to me, I think he'll get more of a regular role this year and will break through as being a full-time NHLer in the bottom six, and could be a nice eye-opener for Tampa. So with all those changes in mind, let's take a look at how this lineup likely looks when we get to opening night. Right now, your top line likely is Braden Point with Stamkos and Kucherov. Your second line most likely is Anthony Cirelli with Brandon Hagel and Connor Shea. Your third line likely would consist of Nick Paul, Tanner Jeannot, and Michael Eyssimont. And then your fourth line could be Glendening, Mont, and Brown. If Watson gets signed, I'm going to say that Watson likely plays a fair bit, probably in place of Brown. Most likely Logan Brown probably becomes the extra forward. Logan Brown's not really a fourth line player. He needs to get more of an offensive opportunity, or he's going to struggle to really be effective and have an impact on this roster. Logan Brown at times can struggle with pace, at speed. He's a really big guy, very skilled, but for a big guy, he doesn't play physical, and he does have good offensive skills. He was drafted as like a huge center for Ottawa. It never really worked out. So after a lot of time, a lot of injuries, a lot of setbacks, and just a lot of, struggles. It was time to move on. He went to St. Louis. They never retained him. Now he's in Tampa. So to me, I think depending on how things go, I could see that lineup being a little different. If they want to give Brown a chance, maybe he plays in the top 6. Maybe you bump Shea to the 3rd line with Paul and Janot. Maybe Yzerman goes down to the 4th line with Glendening and Mott, and you have an option of Watson maybe rotating with one of the other guys or something like that. I mean, obviously Watson and Mott both played in Ottawa last year, so there's certainly some familiarity there. Nick Paul came from Ottawa not long before that, so certainly kind of starting to accumulate some former Senators there on their bottom 6, but ultimately that's kind of where things look. Your D-core will consist of Victor Hedman with Nick Perbix. You got Sergachev, Chernak, DeHaan, and Bogosian right now would likely make up your 3rd pair, with Fleury likely being your number 7. So you've got, obviously you get Darren Radish in there too. Honestly, I think Radish is likely going to be more of a regular than this lineup from dailyfaceoff.com indicates right now. I think Radish is probably going to play a fair bit on your 3rd pair. So we'll see. Obviously, that's just a projection right now, but you got 8 defensemen on the roster who have enough experience that should be able to play. I don't know that DeHaan and Bogosian will necessarily be regulars. You might see Fleury and Radish more, or some combination of Radish with DeHaan, for example. To me, it might make the better 3rd pair, but we'll see. I'm not sure how they're going to do that. And goaltending, you get Vasilevsky and Johansson, which is questionable. Vasilevsky's still one of the better goalies in the league for sure, but he needs a break sometimes, and you need a goalie who can get you some wins when he is not in the lineup, and that's questionable right now. As far as questions facing this team going into the season, is can they, make up the goals that were lost? If you look at Killorn, Colton, even Perry Maroon contributed a decent amount. The guys they brought in, they're likely going to be scoring less than they were before, right? So, Killorn, Colton, Perry, Maroon, you're going to get less goals out of Shea and Mott and Brown and Watson, for sure. So this team is likely taking a step back offensively this year, which is also concerning with the fact that you're probably going to see a bit of a regression defensively with the fact that they don't have a strong backup goaltender right now. You can't play Vasilevsky too much or he's going to be exhausted for the playoffs. And the D-core is likely, the 3rd pair, no matter who you put out there, it's not going to be super strong. Sergachev is really good. Chernak's good. Obviously Perbix, they're comfortable. He can play. Hedman's good. But I don't know. Defensively speaking, I think they're going to be a little bit of a step back from last year. Offensively, I think they're going to be a little bit of a step back from last year. And goaltending is definitely, overall, I don't expect Vasilevsky to not be good, but I think not having that more experience go-to confirmed backup is going to have a big role there as well. Those are all major questions. This bottom 6 is, largely redone again. You have an entirely new 4th line, with, some 3rd line spots maybe being different too. Yzerman didn't play a ton last year. When he did, he was more on the 4th. So you have some changes. And then, of course, you get Shea in the top 6, a little bit different too. So not all changes work out, even though on paper they might look good. Like I said, I don't think this team is going to be bad by any means. I don't know. I think they might be going from, what we saw last year to being probably at best duplicating, if not maybe taking another minor step back. Honestly, I can see the Lightning still being in the playoffs, but I think it might be, probably looking at best case scenario, 3rd in the division, or maybe in that wild card mix. It's really difficult to predict. It's hard to bet against this team because they've been so good for so long. Just to me, when you look at the changes, and if you look at their division, which is really tough, and you look at all the teams they're going to be playing against, a lot of the teams, arguably to say that Buffalo should be better again, Ottawa should be better again, the Leafs are going to be as good or better, Florida took a big step in the playoffs, are they going to be able to duplicate that? Boston is going to be different, they might regress a bit this year. Will Detroit be better? They may not be better enough to go to the playoffs, but they're going to probably be better. Montreal's not that easy to beat either. So it's a tough division. And if you look around saying, well, they've weakened a little bit offensively, they've probably weakened a little bit defensively, it's hard to imagine how they're going to be a bit better team and make some steps back. I mean, I've seen comments from Sergachev saying that they're a bit angry and they want to get back, and they don't want to be the team that lost to the Leafs in the first round last year. And that's all good. I mean, they'll go as far as these top guys can take them. But your top line and your top couple defensemen, like your top 5-6 players, can only get you so far. If the depth and the surrounding cast is not getting it done, then it's just not going to be as successful as you'd like. But again, I think this team is hard to bet against. I do look at them on here on paper as we're doing, and I see lots to probably like, but it's hard to imagine them being better than last year with all the other additions we've seen in the division. That's why I think at best third place, maybe fourth, and you might be in a wild card battle. That's hard to say, but the Lightning, I think, are slowly regressing. They have some other key things to look at as well. Will we see a Steven Stamkos extension? Will things play out? Will they take their time and do this next offseason before UFA season hits? Hard to say, but they have lots of questions that we don't know the answers to, especially in goal, especially with not being quite as strong as they used to be. But let me know, will the Tampa Bay Lightning still be in that playoff cup mix, or do you think it's time that we're going to see them take a step back? Let me know your thoughts on that down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.